You are looking at a Radio Shack HTX-10 10-meter mobile transceiver. This is something that I picked up at a local ham fest a couple of weeks ago. I got a real good price on the radio, but it has one major defect that I need to try and repair today. And that defect is that it has no transmit audio. The radio seems to receive just fine, but when I try to transmit, it'll throw a carrier on AM or FM, but has no audio and puts out no power on sideband. The microphone that came with it is not the original microphone. This is something that the previous owner must have kind of made up. You can kind of see there's up and down buttons, and those do work. But the microphone itself doesn't produce any audio in the radio. I took the mic plug apart already and looked for any shorted wires or anything, especially since it was missing the little set screw that's here that holds the plastic piece to the metal body. And when I pulled it out, I thought there were some shorted wires in there, but I cleared them out and that didn't solve the problem. So fortunately, I have a friend that has an identical radio to this that is a known good working radio, and he also has the factory stock microphone. So he was kind enough to let me borrow his radio and microphone, so I've got them over here out of the camera shot, but I've already tried his microphone on my radio and found that I'm still having a problem. So his known good microphone won't produce any audio on this radio either. So that tells me that the problem is inside the radio someplace. So I've disconnected the power from the radio and gotten that meter out of the way. And you can also see I've removed the case screws. There are a total of 8 screws, 4 on the top cover, 4 on the bottom cover, and 2 on each side. So here, 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 and 4 on the other side. So now let's remove the cover and see if there's anything obvious going on inside the radio. The bottom cover of the radio also contains the internal speaker, which is connected to the main circuit board with a wire and a removable connector. So I'm just going to pull this connector straight out and the whole thing is free to be removed. You can see the connector there. So I'll set the cover aside and let's take a look and see what's going on. One of the more common failure points on these radios is the loss of microphone power at the microphone jack. Now, power is required to activate the condenser inside the stock condenser mic, so that could potentially be the problem with this radio. So as you can see, I've got the radio flipped over and I've got a clip lead on the center pin of the microphone jack, or pin 6, and this is where there should be 13.8 volts present to power the condenser inside the stock condenser mic. So I'm going to turn the radio on. As you can see, I'm not getting any voltage on the meter here with the radio turned on. So that means that this could potentially be the problem with this radio and why it's not producing any audio, especially on that stock mic that I borrowed from my friend. Before I start working on my radio, I thought that I'd bring my friend's radio over here on the bench and just check his out and make sure that his has power on that center pin. So as you can see, I've got the meter connected just like I did before, the only difference being his radio is right side up and has its cover on. So now I'll turn the power on, and as you can see in the meter here, I've got 13.6 volts. So even if this is not what's causing the problem in my radio, I'm going to want to fix it just to put the radio back the way that it should be. As you can see here, I've got the Radio Shack service manual for the HTX-10 up on the laptop here. The first thing I'll do is scroll down and look for the schematic page, which is probably at the end, so that I can take a look at the microphone jack and see where that power is coming from. So here's the page of the schematic that I'm interested in. You can see over here on the lower left, this is the schematic for the microphone itself, and then this is the schematic for the mic jack on the radio. So I'm interested in pin 6. This is where the 13.8 volts should be. So it looks like from pin 6 we get to a inductor, or maybe this is a ferrite bead, Either way, 4.7 microhenries L404. So then from here, it branches off to this resistor, R158 or 138, but it also keeps going here, another node here. So then it branches here, and it looks like it's tied to the power switch, and then off to presumably a header and the main PCB of the radio. But it also goes up here and drives this circuit, IC402, and such. So what I think I'll do is I'll just start trying to test this circuit for voltage and see if I get the 13.8. Now presumably I've got 13.8 at the power switch because the radio does turn on and do everything it's supposed to other than generate microphone audio. So I'm guessing that the problem is going to be, here. So in order to try and figure out where L404 is, I'm going to scroll up in the service manual and see if there is a circuit board diagram here. There's no silk screen on the back of the circuit board on the radio that identifies which component is which. Okay, so here's the main board layout, and it looks like most, if not all, of the parts are shown here. They're not exactly the most readable thing in the world, but they're there. So let me look and see. Okay, this looks like the front panel of the radio. So I think we're looking at the component side, or the side that's visible to me now. And this would be the on-off and volume control. And it looks like the mic jack is here. It's hard to see the pattern in this scan, but it looks like the solder pins are here. So I would presume L404 should be somewhere near this pin 6. So just kind of looking at it, it looks like this is L402 and that might be L404. A little hard to tell in this scan. So now looking at the back of the display circuit board, here are the 6 pins for the microphone jack, and then the various other components we saw in that service manual printout. So based on the service manual diagram, I'm saying that this part here is L404. So what I'll do now is I'll start probing the pads on either side of this part and see if there's any voltage there. So the working quarters in here are a little bit tight because of the surface mount componentry here and the proximity it is to each other. So I've made up this little probe of my own. That'll give me a little more room to fit in there. I'll have to be a little careful, but this is just a standard clip lead, and I've got a piece of a cut resistor lead on there, so I should be able to get in there and just kind of probe those pads and see if there's voltage on them. So the radio is turned on, and I've got the meter set up and ready to go here. I've got the negative lead grounded to the chassis of the radio, so I should be able to just use the positive lead to do my testing. So even though I already know there's no voltage at pin 6, I'm going to start there anyway. And pin 6 is that middle pin on the microphone jack. So probing that, there's nothing there. So now I'm going to go down to L404, and I'm on the top pad of it, and I'm not getting any voltage there. So now I'll go to the bottom pad, and if I can get this to stay, you can see there's my 13.6 volts. So that tells me that this L404 here is just gone open, and that is preventing the power from reaching pin 6. So what I'll do now is turn the power off to the radio, and I'm going to take another clip lead here, and I'm just going to try and bypass L404. So the first thing I'll do is clip to pin 6. There's enough lead protruding where I should be able to get this clip lead on, and I think that'll stay. So then what I'll do is go down to this lead on the power switch, which should have 13.8 volts on it. So I've zoomed in on that a little bit. Oh, this came off, but you can see I'm going to the bottom lead on the power and volume control. And then this one is just going to clip to the center pin like that there. That's on better than it was before. And I don't think anything is shorting to any of the other pins, so we should be good there. So now what I should be able to do is power the radio up and then put my friend's microphone back in there, and theoretically this should work now. So you can see I've got the radio set back up, albeit upside down. I've got it connected to this power meter with a dummy load in line, so I should be able to transmit safely with this. So I'll power the radio up, and you can see that I'm in upper sideband mode. So if I transmit with this, I ought to see some power indication on the meter over here. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. So that looked good. I've got the meter on the 30-watt scale, and reading the scale at the bottom, which is the 30-watt scale, it looked like it was peaking around 25 or 30 watts, which is about what I would expect from a radio like this. So it seems like everything's working. Okay, what I think I'll do now, just to be sure, is I'll put a receiver on in the background that should be able to receive this frequency, and we can hear if the audio sounds good or if there's any artifacts or anything like that on it. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing, 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 testing. So as you heard there, the radio is transmitting, and it sounds okay. It's a little hard to tell because I was getting some feedback there, just because the radios are so close. I probably could have dialed the RF gain back a little on the ICOM to try and cut down on some of that, but I think overall this thing's working okay, and I think it's worth proceeding with doing a permanent fix here and then doing an on-air check and maybe doing an alignment later to dial it in, but I think this is going to be okay. So I think the permanent fix here is to kind of emulate what this wire is doing and just solder in a jumper wire between pin 6 and the on-off and volume control down here, this pin. Now, of course, bypassing that part is going to mean that whatever benefits that was providing for RF filtering or choking or whatever are not going to obviously be there anymore, but I think everything's going to be okay without it. It's going to be real difficult to find a part like this and replace it with the correct part, so I think just jumpering it is going to be the best thing to do here. I guess the other thing I could try and do is I could just try and desolder this part and just run a little solder bridge between the pads, but in doing that I run the risk of desoldering some of these other parts around it if I get too much heat in there. So I really think just putting a jumper wire on, similar to what I've got here, is going to be the easiest thing to do for this radio. So you should be able to see that I soldered a black insulated wire, one end of it on the on-off and volume control here, and the other end on pin 6 of the microphone jack. So just to make sure that everything is soldered up correctly, I'll fire the radio up and try it one more time. Before I fire the radio up, I'm going to reconnect the speaker and bottom cover. So I'm just going to plug the speaker back onto this header that's back here on the main circuit board. And I'll just drop this on like that. And now I'll reconnect the power and the meter, and we'll give this one more try. So I've got the radio all reconnected to the meter and the dummy load, and I'll turn it on. And of course, now that I've got the speaker hooked up, we can hear some static there coming from the speaker. Once again, in upper sideband, I'll key the radio, and we should see power on the meter. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. So that all looks good. That's still working okay. I'm just going to go over to AM now, and we should see carrier. And when I talk and modulate the radio, we get a little bit more power out of it the more we modulate it. So everything seems to be working just fine now. Okay, so that repair seems to have taken care of any problems in the radio. On the stock mic, such as this one, the radio seems to perform as it should. So I should be able to close the radio up, put the cover back on, and all that sort of thing. But since I have to return this microphone to my friend, I'll need to now figure out what to do for a microphone for this. Either search for another one of these somewhere, or try and wire up something that I have in my junk box to work on this radio now that I know that it's fully functional. Well, I think that'll just about do it for the repair of this Radio Shack HTX-10 10-meter mobile radio. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. Thanks for watching.